Are you autistic and also have an intense need and desire to be liked all the time? Do you apologise often, even if you're not in the wrong? Do you crave external validation? Do you feel mean or wrong when you set a boundary or you manipulate that you have needs too? Do you have an on edge feeling all the time or a need for everything to be perfect? Are you a categoric rule follower where you've always been labelled as the good girl, the good guy? Are you somebody who thinks that other people's opinion matters more than yours because you're not quite sure what yours are? And are you sensitive to criticism? These are just a few of the things that I will label as potentially being people pleaser like traits. It's not exclusive to just those things. It goes far beyond those things, and those are just some of the things that I think I see the most often. Hi, I'm Jade. Welcome to my channel. I'm a person-centered private therapist who runs JMS Wellbeing, and I'm also autistic. People pleasing is ultimately where you will abandon your own needs and believe that other people's needs hold a higher prevalence than yours, and by attending to them, you ultimately are often seen as somebody who is very agreeable, very kind, and just a really nice person to be around, but often at the expense of yourself and what is going on internally for you. So I wanted to start with the root causes of why people pleasing often happens within the autistic community, in particular if you are late diagnosed, and the consequences of that. And then I'm going to go into what you can do about that to help yourself. So the first root that I think is fundamental is, and it's true for everybody, including neurotypical people too, which would be that it is a safety response and a survival response to want to belong to something like a community of people and feel safe within that. This is something that autistic people don't get to feel very often. They're often othered, they're often ostracised, and this is happening from a very, very, very young age, where unless you have a very supportive family or a very supportive community who accept you as you are and don't encourage ableism, don't encourage you to basically be praised for being more or performing more neurotypically, then what's going to happen is that's very rare that actually gets to happen. What happens if that isn't happening is that you begin to notice that you are receiving criticism. You make people angry just for being yourself, and it's not because there's anything wrong, but it's because of the lack of understanding and the lack of support that actually you don't need to be anything else other than you, and that naturally neurodivergent children get that response a lot less than a neurotypical child does. And what this ultimately ends up resulting in is that we move into a safety response, a survival response to belong. So we begin to mirror the people around us and act more like them in order to feel safe, in order to feel like we belong somewhere, in order to feel attachment and love and connection to the people around us. This also happens for people with any difference, because it's not universally the thing that everybody sees and the thing that everybody accepts. The second thing would be the social conditioning, which would be the idea that if you see that you're getting a positive response, or you're actually encouraged to attend to the needs of others and be selfless, which is generally pushed as a great quality in a human being, then you're going to learn that that results in praise, or that results in some level of validation. So I think that the second route would be the social conditioning. And the third route, I believe that it can be just learned and picked up from others too. If you watch on as your mum is selfless, or your dad does selfless acts, or that people's response to them doing those things, or you might even see it in a movie, or you might see it in the qualities that a teacher possesses, and you look upon that and you think that's really nice because I can see that they see other people and understand other people, and they are taking care of other people, regardless of whether they're taking care of themselves, and you see that as a positive quality, which again, I think we're conditioned to believe that it is, of course, you might be more likely to just naturally learn that behaviour from others in order to try to generate those same feelings that you're feeling in regards to it when you're watching upon it, to also generate that for yourself. Now, let's move on to the consequences of prolific people pleasing. I think that this might be a really hard one to hear, but I say it with love. It will result in emotional and mental exhaustion without a shadow of a doubt, because you're actually never being your authentic self, because you believe that your authentic self means rejection. You believe that being your authentic self means that that community of people that you've been able to establish due to the minimizing of yourself and the meeting of somebody else's needs is going to be taken away from you. So what you end up doing is you end up hiding who you are and how you truly feel, and understanding yourself and understanding what you need under layers and layers of fawning and people pleasing and basically not showing up for yourself. The other consequence is that you will end up having definitely some relationship difficulties and issues with other people, problems in even healthy relationships too, because we are often conflict avoidant, and this ultimately means that we believe that conflict, which is absolutely necessary, disagreement is necessary, conflict is necessary, the working through and communicating two different truths and the merging of the world to come to a shared agreement of how you move through that thing into a better place together is absolutely necessary. I know it's different to what we're told, that happy, healthy relationships never argue. No, they will disagree. Maybe argue is not the greatest terminology for it, but they will definitely disagree. It's what makes the relationship healthy is how they come together with that conflict or disagreement and how they work through it and come to the other side. If you're conflict avoidant, there's going to be a whole lot of resentment caused because you are so uncomfortable with discomfort. And the other thing would be that you've actually never shown up as your authentic self. And if you've never shown up as your authentic self, like I said a little bit earlier, then how do you truly expect to feel seen and loved and cared for and connected to? And again, this is not a criticism of you. I've been there. This was me, and I felt all these things. I'm saying it because I genuinely want to help people. There will definitely be some relationship difficulties that you will have in resentment being formed because you are so uncomfortable with the discomfort of not pleasing somebody, or somebody being cross with you, or somebody having a different opinion to you. And if you were somebody who's showing up as your authentic self and you meet somebody who is also showing up as their authentic self, and there is some overlap where you get to actually truly connect, that is ultimately what everybody's searching for. However, what happens with people pleasing is there is a layer of you not being able to actually truly show up, which means that any connection you make fundamentally is never going to truly feel safe. It's based off I will become the person you need me to be in order to have what it is that you're offering, which is the thing that I'm seeking, which is connection and safety. And I think that the reason that people might be more likely to fall into abusive relationships in the autistic community, or anybody who is just a people pleaser in general, is because of a couple of reasons. And I'm going to go from the point of view of self. I don't tend to lie. So if somebody says to me, I am this person, I don't tend to assume that they're lying to me. I tend to assume that because it wouldn't cross my mind to do that, that they would be doing the same thing. And we also know that people who are more likely to be abusive, narcissistic, or any of those sort of undesirable dark tetrad qualities, they're very good at manipulation, and they're very good at seeking out vulnerability and seeking out people who don't ultimately hold boundaries. And I think that that is just naturally like a natural gravitational pull. I also think that the other reason why people might be more likely to end up in an abusive relationship is because if you are a prolific people pleaser, over time you will have gradually lost your ability to understand self and understand where your boundaries are and that kind of crossover. And I think that when a person sees that you don't have a established sense of self, or they pick up that you will do anything for them at any cost, that kind of, obviously they're going to lean towards you, but also there's an element of that you might lean towards them. Sometimes if you have lost that sense of self, anybody who projects a sense of certainty and control might feel like a safe bet when it's not a safe bet, because ultimately they're exhibiting behaviours that are domineering over not just self, as in their self, but others too. And that could be one of the reasons why we lean in. Another reason I often see people lean in, and this was true for me, would be that when I have difference, I don't necessarily feel the same as the people in the room who have just steady safety, consistency, because I don't feel the same as that. And I also want to keep myself safe against any possible threat, which sometimes can be in the people who also exhibit the other side of the qualities I just mentioned, which is that they have difference, they have spikes, they have things that I believed at one stage of my life I could help them, they could help me work through the things that we are going through. But the fundamental difference is that I'm willing and wanting to, and in a place of awareness to, whereas maybe they wasn't. So I think that those are the two fundamental reasons why people might lean in more to an abusive relationship. And I think that the other consequence is that it interferes with, which I've mentioned, our sense of self, and we end up with ingrained beliefs and ingrained behaviours that do not serve us. So this could look like something like, I believe that a good person is somebody who doesn't think about self at all. I believe that self-care is optional. I believe that, and I will do anything to take care of everybody around me, regardless of what's going on for me internally, and regardless of my capacity, and regardless of any consequence that has on my emotional or mental health, because I believe that I'm a good person, and that is what good people do. And this is a great and very complex thing that often needs support in being undone and restitched back together in the way that is beneficial to you and your well-being, and beneficial to you actually establishing healthy relationships and moving forward in your authentic autistic self, away from the framework that has been formed due to beliefs that served you then to a degree and no longer serve you now. Now you are at a greater level of awareness. So what can you do about it? The first thing, because nothing comes before this, we have to become more self-aware about where the beliefs might lie, where the problems might lie, where the behaviours might lie, and to the greatest degree of truth that we can come across at that time. And what I mean by that is, say for example, I was in resistance to being aware of something because it made me feel uncomfortable, then I'm not going to be able to do anything with that. So I'll give you an example. If my husband says to me that every time somebody walks in your path, the moment that you come into contact with that person, you apologise and you move out of the way. If I was like, well, that's not true, I don't do that, but I do that, I'm not going to be able to do anything with that. But if I actually go, do you know what? It might be hard to admit that I might have people-pleasing like tendencies that are not serving me, but I'm going to just spend the next week or two just opening myself up to the idea that, is that true? Let me observe myself. And then the moment that the penny is dropped in, it's often something that you can't avoid noticing anyway. But open yourself up to, without resistance, what could possibly be true and what behaviours you might exhibit that are people pleasing. And then once you have that self-awareness, all the other steps become possible in change. And I'm going to probably do a video on habit changing, because habits happen all the time, whether we believe them to be there or not. And we all have habits every day that basically align us to the life that we get to live. And there are some fundamental truths that are true about our identity that aren't something that we are going to be working against, but there are some things ingrained in our behaviour and our thoughts that are actually not beneficial to us and we can do something about. And the second thing that I think that once you've done the self-awareness tasks, we can move towards the idea of and accepting self for all that we are, so that we then ultimately pull away from needing that to be validated by somebody else, and we begin to start to validate ourselves as we are, and understand that the only way we get to make true connection with somebody is to show up truthfully. We're not made to be everybody's. I say this all the time, and rejection to a degree is inevitable because we're not going to be made for everybody. So we're not made to connect with everybody, but the only way that you connect with people that you're made for is to be you and to show up as you. Otherwise you're never going to get to have that, and to ultimately seek support. I think that that can be a hard one, especially if you are a people pleaser, because you are so used to buffering everything, weathering everything, taking care of everything. But I think it takes great strength to become vulnerable and understand that vulnerability is a strength towards your truth. And I also think that it takes great strength to say that actually, as human beings, we all need support from time to time and finding that right person for us. And I think that the other thing that I would finish on is establishing strong boundaries and understanding that boundaries don't make you a bad person. Everybody should have boundaries, and nobody will have a problem with your boundaries if they are a healthy individual and they have their own, or they are comfortable with other people having their own. I'm going to be doing a video on that, and once it's done I will link it to the bottom of this video so you can just push on right through. I hope this has been helpful. Please let me know what your thoughts are. What people-pleasing behaviour have you noticed yourself do as a either autistic individual or a late diagnosed autistic individual? What ways do you minimise who you are and what is true for you, so that you don't have to seem difficult, or you don't have to seem like a burden, or you don't have to seem human? Again, I know that this is a sensitive subject. A lot of the stuff that I will touch on hit something inside us about what is true for us. So just remember to be respectful in the comments, and yeah, I would love to know your thoughts. Speak soon.